Hi, everyone. Today I have with me best-selling author J.A. Jance. And J.A. has written several series, including the J.P. Beaumont series, Joanna Brady, Ali Reynolds, The Walker Family. She's written a book of poetry, and she is just an author extraordinaire. So thank you so much for talking to me today.
I'm happy to be here, Michelle.
Well, I have in front of me your new book called Man Overboard, and it's part of the Ali Reynolds novel, and I love this book so much. I love your writing. I can't say enough about it, and I'm sure you've heard it from many more people than me, but I just want to thank you for being such an amazing thriller author that, that I can read in one sitting, basically.
Well, thank you. I'm a storyteller at heart, and I think I try to keep my stories moving in a way that maintains my interest and my reader's interest.
Yes, and I promise there will be no, I'm not going to give anything to anybody because I want them to experience exactly what I experienced while I was reading this book. And I do not read a lot of thrillers, I have to say. I just don't. And when I do, I find that I'm just so blown away by them because I always pick very good authors. I mean, a thriller is such a specific thing, and it has to keep you on the edge of your seat. And then when you're done, you're like, and that's exactly what you do for me. And the Man Overboard, it's so amazing because the way it starts off, it's completely different than any other thriller book that I have read. And I just, I was like, wow, this is, you right up front are dealt with the murder and the murderer instead of trying to figure out who the murderer is. And it's just a way different concept. Did you use that for a lot of your books?
No, I don't do that for a lot of books, but for this one, it worked, and it's that way in the Walker family books as well, especially in Hour of the Hunter. You know straight out who the bad guy is. The question is he going to get away with it?
Right.
So I think that sort of sets mysteries apart from thrillers, at least the way I see it. Not every author would agree with me on that topic, I don't imagine, but that's how I see it. With the thrillers, you know who the guy is, and you need to watch out for that guy. And
you're on the edge of your seat, like, can he do it? And even though you're hoping that he can't do it, you're like, oh my gosh, I think he is. I think he's definitely smart enough to get away with this,
Well, he was almost smart enough to get away with it until he got too big for his britches.
Right. And what I love about it is that, you wrote a book that this book is very relevant to today as far as like technology. And, a lot of people don't even want to try to, write about that because it changes every day. It's always being updated. But I found, and I'm older, I'm in my 50s, and, but I could really get into the way that you dealt with technology in this book.
Well, I'm a liberal arts major, and I have come to technology slowly and not always happily.
Right.
But in this book, as I was writing this book, it deals with artificial intelligence. We have the bad guy, and we have the bad guy's accomplice, who just happens to be an artificial intelligence. And as I was writing the book, I'm telling the story, and I'm wondering, is this believable? Is this something that could happen? Because when the AI starts having differences of opinion with the bad guy,
yes,
I tried to figure out, well, does that make sense? Well, then a few weeks after I finished writing the manuscript, we found an article telling how the AI engineers at Google had discovered that if they stopped disregarding their AI's advice, the AI got cranky with them. Oh, bingo.
That's awesome. And you are in the intelligence center. You know, you're in Seattle a lot of the time, and I always look at that as like the intelligence center of the world. You know.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And
but the other thing about this story, though, when I've been writing. This is Ali Reynolds number 12, and once Ali's, the guy who has become Ali's husband, B. Simpson, shows up. Once you meet B and his company, High Noon Enterprises, then you meet Stuart Ramey, his helper. Well, I've been curious about Stuart Ramey for 12 books, for 11 books, and the only way for me to find out more about him was to write a book about him. And that's what Man Overboard is. You learn the backstory of Stuart and why he is the way he is.
Well, you authors that can write all these series books and multiple series and like every other year coming out with books on each series is just amazing to me. I mean, I don't know how you do it. I really do. I mean, us as readers, we're happy that you're doing it. We were like, yes, keep doing it. But as the writer, does it keep it interesting going back and forth? I mean, how do you go about getting into or deciding like, okay, this series needs another book, or I'm going back to this series? I mean, do you just decide?
Well, I have two publishers.
Mm-hmm.
Simon & Schuster does the Ali Reynolds books.
Mm-hmm.
HarperCollins does the other three books. Both publishers want a book a year, which means that Ali Reynolds gets a book every year, and the other three characters sort of have to take a number and get in line.
Well, even if you're doing that, I mean, that is an extremely large amount of writing every year. And, you know, I think, anyway.
Well, it is a large amount of writing, particularly when you take into consideration the fact that publishing 2 books a year entails 2 book tours a year.
Oh.
And a book tour tends to take a month out of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
exactly.
I'm writing 2 books a year with approximately 10 months available for writing.
And I don't think I ever understood that until I started to interview authors. Us as readers, we don't understand that. And when I started scheduling these interviews, and authors would be like, okay, I have exactly 3 weeks to write, and then I'm on a book tour for a month, and then I got to come back, and then I got to write another book. So, you know, it's like, it's crazy the schedule that you are on for, you know, writing, then touring, and then writing, and then, you know, fitting it all in, and having a life on top of it.
And having a life with the kids and grandkids were here over the weekend. Mm-hmm. It was summer in Seattle this weekend, and so everybody came to Grandma's house to swim.
Aww.
So it is necessary to maintain a life in addition to maintaining a work life, because that's what keeps you sane, and that's the reason for doing the work life.
Right. Exactly. But you've been writing books since 1985.
No.
Okay.
I started writing in 1982. The first book was published in 1985.
Oh, okay. Sorry. But then do you find it like, I mean, that's a lot of years. Like, do you still get the same excitement out of each new book now as you've been writing and is it still like something that you're just as passionate about?
There is nothing quite like opening an envelope and seeing the real book with pages and a cover. That is always an exciting time for me. J.P. Beaumont and I have been together as author and character since 1982. And I just, 10 minutes before this interview, the copy editing for Beaumont number 22, a book called Proof of Life, showed up in my computer. So that's what I'm going to be spending the rest of the afternoon and tomorrow doing, the copy editing on Proof of Life. That book is due out in September. So it's Beaumont 22. When I started writing that book, as soon as Beau started talking to me, characters talked to me, I felt like I was completely at home with him again. Like he'd been out of my life for a while, and I was glad to run into him.
Aww. I guess, that must be the whole, and like I said, like going back and forth between the two series that you are going, and then filling in with the others, like that must feel like that when you get to go back and write another one of his books,
That's true. It's sort of like getting a Christmas card. The people you get Christmas cards from once a year, you may not see them from year to year, but you're always glad to hear what they've been up to.
Right.
And that's what it's like writing a book on one of my long-term characters.
Well, I was watching one of your YouTube talks that you gave, and I love when somebody had asked you if you, like are reading the newspaper for new kinds of crimes that are happening, if that's what, and I love how you said, like, I don't do that to anybody. Like my books are not written after a crime because of putting the people through it again after they've already experienced it.
However, the problem with writing fiction is that sometimes life imitates fiction. Man Overboard is a book about cyberbullying and someone using texting and emails to encourage someone to give up and commit suicide. And just in the past 2 weeks, that young woman in Massachusetts was found guilty of manslaughter for doing just that, encouraging her boyfriend to commit suicide.
I saw that recently, somewhere out there. Yeah, I didn't even make the connection of the two, but I guess there is.
So I didn't base my story on that story, but that story surfaced after I wrote my book.
Right.
So I can't be held responsible for ripping that one from the headlines because the headlines came later.
Right.
In my Beaumont series, one of his early partners, a guy named Von Peters, is badly injured and ends up a paraplegic. And when he came back to work, I had him working initially in the media relations office. And someone wrote to me saying, how dare I base Ron Peters on the guy in Everett who is paraplegic and is now working in media relations. Well, the problem is Ron Peters was in the media relations long before the guy in Everett got hurt.
Don't you love how you can get, the blame for that?
Well, it's really spooky. When I wrote Dismissed with Prejudice, the murder weapon in that book was a samurai sword that had come back to the States as a trophy from World War II. 2 weeks after that book was published, some Japanese businessmen came to Seattle, to the Seattle area, set up shop in a hotel, and invited people to bring their trophy samurai swords in so they could buy them back and take them back home to Japan. And that one really, I'm not over that one yet.
That's awesome. Well, I was reading the story on your most recent blog, and I thought you could share with everyone about your anniversary, because I thought that was so precious. It's such a great story.
Well, I did a poetry reading of my book of poetry, After the Fire, in 1985. After it was published in 1984. After the Fire is the story of my first marriage. It's I spent 18 years with a man who died of chronic alcoholism at age 42, a year and a half after I divorced him.
Mm-hmm.
And the title poem of After the Fire goes like this: I had touched the fire. It burned me, but I knew I lived. It seared me, but it made me whole. He called me. I went gladly, though I saw the rocks, fell laughing through the singeing air. I have known the fire. I'll live with nothing rather than with less. The flame is out. There's nothing left but ash.
I love that.
And in terms of husband material, my first husband was a dead loss, but from the point of view of a mystery writer, the guy was a gold mine of material. But in 1985, I was invited to do a poetry reading of that book at a widowed retreat, a retreat for newly widowed people. And I was very nervous about going because I had been divorced for a year and a half when my husband died, and all of those other people were obviously still married to their spouses when they died.
Mm-hmm.
But I went there and feeling like I hadn't quite had my ticket punched, got there, and at lunchtime on Saturday, a woman came over and said, "This is a guy you need to meet." And so I met him at lunch, but I was doing one of my very first ever poetry readings that afternoon, so I was nervous about that. So I didn't pay a whole lot of attention. I did the poetry reading. That evening, they had a grief support group, and the people who were running the retreat said, "Well, if you feel like grieving, go ahead and do it here." When my husband died, the guys at work said, "Well, what are you upset about? You divorced him, didn't you?" Well,
mm-hmm.
Yes, I had that piece of paper, but that didn't mean the relationship was over.
Mm-hmm.
So at the retreat that evening, I went to the grief support group, and we were supposed to go around the room, say our name, our spouse's name, what our spouses died of, and when they died. And I said, my name was Judy. My husband's name was Jerry. He died of chronic alcoholism on New Year's Eve of 1982-83. And a third of the way around the room was this guy who said the same guy from lunch, who said his name was Bill, his wife's name was Lynn. She died of breast cancer on New Year's Eve, 1984-85. And I thought, New Year's Eve, what a bad night for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we were supposed to share. And so I talked about how I was on my own and writing books and raising my kids and doing the best I could, because obviously my life as a woman was over. Nobody had shown any interest in me for 5 years, so why wouldn't it be? And then I waited to see what this guy, whose wife died on the same day of the year, was going to say, and he said nothing. So when the grief support group was over, I went looking for him with blood in my eye, because I had shared and he hadn't. I walked up to him And I said, so what are you, the strong silent type? And he said, it still hurts too much to talk about it. Within 5 minutes, I was literally crying on his shoulder. That was on, according to legend, Saturday, the 21st of June of 1985. And 6 months later, on the 21st of December, we got married. And so for 30 plus years, I told the story about how we met on the longest day of the year and got married on the shortest day of the year. And that was just fine up until a week and a half ago. I wrote a novella called Still Dead, a Beaumont novella, which will be out on the 8th of August. And I was writing it on a cruise ship, and I didn't want to have to check a lot of stuff. So I thought, well, I'm going to use a cold case, and I'll set it on that date because I know all about the 21st of June of 1985.
Mm-hmm.
That was fine until the copy editing showed up, and that's when I discovered that Saturday in June of 1985 was not the 21st. It was the 22nd. Which somebody who knows way more about solstices than I do has assured me that that means that the 22nd is actually, the solstice is on the 21st. So the 22nd is actually the longest day of the year.
There you go.
So you're more or less right.
Oh, that's an awesome story. I love that. And, you know, having gone through divorce and, you know, all the fun parts of that, I mean, it warmed my heart. And, you know, I just love that. And and as a single mom, I am now a single mom again. I started out as a single mom, and I have 6 children, and I'm a single mom again. And I love stories like yours that, you know, it makes us feel like it's not over. You know, like there still is something else out there, because it is a daunting feeling. So I loved when you said that. It's like, okay, I've been doing this for how long? And, you know, you feel in a very stuck place. And for some reason, I seem to find authors that are in your, you know, in both of our situations. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there are so many people out. I'm meeting more and more every day, you know, that show what you can do, you know?
Well, I think for people who are in challenging relationships, After the Fire, my book of poetry, is a real gift, because when I was involved with a man, I wasn't aware that he was dying of chronic alcoholism. I figured he was going to go off and live fine. But he actually, once he had me out of his life and keeping, when I no longer had my foot on the brake pedal, he was able to kill himself with booze in 1.5 years. But when you're locked inside one of those relationships with someone who has substance abuse issues or domestic violence issues, you think that you are the only person in the whole world who was ever stupid enough to believe all those lies.
Right.
And After the Fire is a real gift to people. I hear from people who have had that book put in front of them, and they tell me that it has been a beacon in the darkness.
Right. And, you know, I did not have that situation, but my mom died from alcoholism. So when I was reading it, I mean, it hit me from that point too, because I tried so hard to understand what she was going through, and I didn't while she was alive. I have come to understand more. But when you watch somebody die from something that seems like they should be able to have a little bit of control over it, you don't understand when you're going through it. It's only taken years to be able to understand it. And so that's what I was thinking about when I read those poems.
Well, the other thing, when I was writing the poems in the middle of the darkness, and it wasn't until years later when the poems were being published and I was reviewing them for publication and editing them, that was when it finally dawned on me. You know, my first husband was a drinker when I met him. And it was not fair of me to marry him expecting to be able to fix him.
Right.
I had no right to fix him. Fixing him wasn't my job. And if I had let him be, we both would have been a lot happier.
Right. Yes, exactly. Well, I think that truth holds for every divorce out there. You know, if we just understand that, it is kind of freeing, you know.
But here is something. I was with my first husband for 18 years. When I started writing my first Detective Beaumont book, the Beaumont books are written in the first person through Beau's point of view, and he couldn't work all the time. So part of the time, when he was at home, I had him do the kind of drinking that I had lived with for all those years. And I thought it was just sort of like stage business. It was something for him to do when he wasn't working or thinking about the case or talking about the case. 4 books into the series, I was down in Portland doing a book signing, and a lady came up to the table, and she said, you know, Beau drinks every day. He has a drink of choice. It's starting to interfere with his work. Does J.P. Beaumont have a problem? And I looked at her like she was nuts, and I said, you know, these are books. But in the course of that set of signings, 6 other people asked me the same question. And I thought, you know, maybe the author is the very last person to figure this out. So that was in book 4. In book 7, he has his first blackout. It's the first blackout that he has to admit is a blackout. In book number 8, he's in treatment. I just finished writing Beaumont number 22. So there have been a dozen more books with him sober than there were with him drinking. I still have people who come up to me and say they liked him better when he was drunk. I worry about them. But the other thing that is interesting to me was that aspect of the story went into the books under my radar. I didn't realize I was doing it.
Interesting.
In the Joanna Brady books, Joanna Brady has been at war with her mother practically from the day she was born. But especially from the time when she was a teenager when her father died. In the first book, Joanna Brady's husband dies. So Joanna is the daughter of a mother who was the last parent standing in her family. But Joanna is also the last parent standing in her family. And what I've learned through my own personal experience is if you're in a family where a parent dies early, the parent who dies early gets a get-out-of-jail-free card. Of course, they're dead, but they're also perfect. It's the person who is left holding the bag and who has to establish the rules and get you through homework and junior high and high school. That person becomes the source of all evil. And that got written into the background of the Joanna Brady books, again, without my being actively conscious of it. It was just there. It was an ongoing thing. And gradually, as Joanna matured, she came to see that her father was not the perfection that she thought he was. and her mother was not all evil.
I love that. Well,
In other words,
I mean, my dad died young too, so I get that. That is, I really get that.
but those things that go into the background of books, those things are the magic of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the parts of things that go in because you're authentic, because you're learning about the characters, and you're putting your own wisdom that you've learned along the way back into your book. And I don't think those are things that can be artificially grafted on by taking a fiction writing class at a university.
Right.
Either you're a storyteller or you're not.
Yeah, and I love how you say about outlining too. Is like you didn't like outlining ever, so you don't outline. You just tell the story.
Right. We all get on and we go for a ride, and at the end of 100,000 words, we better know who the killer was.
That's awesome. I love that. I also saw I'm in Pennsylvania, okay, and I have interviewed some authors that are going to be at Thriller Fest, and of course I pull up your website and find out you're going to be there too.
Yes, I will. I'm in the anthology, the thriller, International Thriller Writers Anthology that's out right now. It's called Matchup, and it's a series of short stories and novellas written in tandem by it's sort of a couple thing. It's a male writer paired with a female writer, but the pairing was done in a way that is sort of complete polar opposites. So I'm paired with Eric von Lustbader, who writes who's carrying on the Bourne tradition.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And so novellas are sort of like wine tastings. You go to a wine tasting, and they set out several bottles for you to taste, and you try these and figure out which one you like. Well, this is sort of a literary wine tasting. And so if you were going to call the vintages here, Eric Van Lustbader would be a very smoky port, and I would be a bright summery Riesling.
Right. Interesting.
But our short story is called Taking the Veil, and it pairs his Bravo Shaw with my Ali Reynolds, the lead character from Man Overboard.
So at the Thriller Fest, because I was looking at the schedule, do you already have a time that you are going? I think that you already have a time for speaking, but I didn't see I saw you're going to do book signing, but do you have a time for the book signing yet?
I do. Just 1 second. Let me bring up that schedule. Hang on.
Okay. Because I've been talking to a couple of authors. Go ahead.
I'll be doing a book signing on Wednesday, July 12th at the after the Grip Lit panel. That's at noon on at the Bryant Park Outdoor Reading Room, and there's a signing after that. Then on Thursday, I will be doing a signing for HarperCollins. I'll be doing a signing after my 9 a.m. craft fest thing to outline or not to outline. I'll be doing a signing on Friday, 9:45 to 10:15 a.m. at the HarperCollins table. So I'll be doing panels and signings throughout the whole thing. There's at least one signing every day.
Oh, that's awesome. I've never been to one, but everybody keeps saying you have to go to them. You have to get, I was talking to a couple of authors, and they're like, oh, my gosh, you have to go. They're so amazing.
Well, this is the first one I've attended, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, well, I hope to see you. I'm going to bring my book. So I hope to be able to find you. It's going to be, I don't know how crazy it gets. I don't know how many people are going to go. I heard it can get a little crazy, but I'm going to do my best.
Well, I will be findable, and I will have my red pen. I always autograph books in red pen.
Oh, you do? Is there a reason?
Yes, because back in the old days when I used to do stock signings, later on if somebody bought that book and wanted it personalized, then I had to go looking for the right color pen. Now I always use a red pen, so I always have the right color to personalize books.
Oh, that's amazing. I like that. That's a great story. So, well, thank you so much for talking to me. Like I said, it's such an honor, and you're such an amazing author, and I'm so happy that you'll be speaking there because there's going to be a lot of new authors that are going to love what you have to say. You've had a lot of experience. You've written a lot of books, and, the fact that you want to pass it on is just, it's such a blessing for them.
Well, thank you, and I'm looking forward to meeting you, Michelle.
Okay, and I will have all of your links for everybody. They will be posted underneath this. And her new book, again, is called Man Overboard, and it's part of the Ali Reynolds novels. And I hope to see you there. So I will try to make a point of it. Okay.
Fair enough.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.